Raymond raised his glass beside my father's funeral portrait and said, "My brother understood one thing better than anyone in this room. Companies survive because strong men lead them." The reception hall went quiet. I was still standing beside the podium where I'd just finished reading my dad's eulogy. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the folded paper anymore. Then Raymond looked directly at me. "And since Richard is gone," he continued, smoothing his tie, "ownership of Smith Logistics now transfers to me." A few people gasped softly. Nobody challenged him. Not the executives sitting near the front, not the investors lining the walls, not even my own relatives. I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" Raymond sighed like I was embarrassing him. "Merveille, this isn't the time." "You're lying," I said. "My father never told me anything about you taking over." Several executives immediately looked down at the tables. Raymond stepped closer. "Your father built this company with me. He knew it needed experienced leadership." "You were the CFO," I snapped. "That doesn't make it yours." His face hardened instantly. Then, in front of everyone, my uncle grabbed my collar and shoved me backward. The room froze. "Do not make a scene at your father's funeral," he said quietly. I looked around the hall. Nobody moved. Nobody defended me. Not even the company attorneys sitting silently in the back corner. I slowly straightened my black suit jacket, picked up my purse, and walked toward the exit while Raymond resumed talking to investors like nothing had happened. Rain hammered the parking lot outside. I sat inside my car, gripping the steering wheel, trying not to break down. Then I grabbed my phone and made one call. "If my father left anything behind," I whispered, "now's the time." 30 minutes later, the doors to the reception hall opened again. A tall man in a dark overcoat walked inside carrying a black document case. And the second Raymond saw him, he stopped talking mid-sentence. The entire room noticed. My uncle's face lost color so fast it looked like someone had drained the blood straight out of him. The man closed the umbrella beside the door and calmly scanned the room until his eyes landed on me. Raymond recovered first. "Everyone," he said quickly, forcing a smile, "today has been emotional. Legal matters will be handled privately at a later time." The man with the case didn't stop walking. "I'm afraid that won't be possible," he said. The room shifted instantly. Investors exchanged looks. Employees started whispering. My aunt slowly lowered her wine glass. Raymond intercepted the man halfway across the hall. "This is not the appropriate setting." "It's exactly the setting your brother instructed me to use." My chest tightened. The stranger finally turned toward me. "Miss Smith?" I nodded carefully. "I'm Daniel Mercer, your father's attorney." Raymond immediately stepped between us. "My niece is grieving," he said sharply. "Whatever this is can wait." Daniel didn't even look at him. "Your father anticipated resistance." That sentence hit me harder than the funeral had. Resistance. Not confusion. Not disagreement. Resistance. Suddenly, memories I'd ignored for months started pushing back into my head. Late nights at the office, my father locking his office door, the way conversations stopped whenever Raymond entered the room. 3 weeks before his death, I'd brought my dad dinner while he was still working upstairs after midnight. As I reached his office, I heard shouting inside. "If this comes out," my father warned, "everything collapses." Raymond stormed out seconds later and nearly slammed into me in the hallway. "You need to stop spying on private conversations," he snapped. My father looked exhausted that night, more exhausted than sick. Back in the reception hall, my aunt suddenly pulled me aside. "Merveille," she whispered nervously. "Raymond's been meeting with investors all week, before your father was even buried." I stared at her. "What?" "He said leadership needed stability." A cold feeling spread through my stomach. This hadn't started today. My uncle had planned this before the funeral ever happened. I turned toward one of the senior executives my father trusted most. "Did you know about this?" The man hesitated too long, then quietly said, "Raymond ordered accounting to release financial control documents 2 days ago." 2 days ago? I repeated. My father's death certificate wasn't even finalized. The executive rubbed his jaw nervously. Nobody wanted conflict. Why didn't my father stop him? The man looked toward Raymond across the room, then lowered his voice. Because near the end, your father looked scared of him. Before I could even process that answer, Daniel Mercer stepped beside me and placed the black document case on the table. Then he leaned closer and quietly said, "Your father told me this might happen." I looked down at the locked case. My throat tightened. What exactly did he leave behind? Raymond answered before Daniel could. My brother left behind a grieving daughter who doesn't understand how corporations work. The reception hall went tense again. Daniel kept one hand resting on the black case. "Mr. Smith, your brother gave very specific instructions regarding, and those instructions can wait," Raymond interrupted sharply. For the first time all evening, I saw something underneath my uncle's confidence. Panic. Small, controlled, but there. He turned toward the room and forced another polished smile onto his face. "Everyone, please. Today is about family. Legal matters will be handled privately." Nobody moved. Not the investors, not the executives, not even the relatives who'd been nodding along with him 30 minutes earlier. Raymond noticed it too. That was when I realized something important. He needed control of the room, and he was starting to lose it. The sight pulled me back to the final weeks before my father died. He'd become secretive almost overnight. Every evening, his office door stayed locked long after everyone else left. Files disappeared from shared drives. Meetings got canceled without explanation. One night, I brought him food around 11. The lights in his office were still on. Before I knocked, I heard Raymond shouting through the door. "You think handing this to outsiders fixes anything?" My father's voice came back lower, controlled. "If this comes out, everything collapses." Then silence. A second later, the door flew open. Raymond stepped into the hallway and froze when he saw me standing there holding takeout containers. His face twisted instantly. "You really enjoy listening at doors, don't you?" he snapped. I wasn't. "Go home, Merveille." Behind him, my father looked exhausted. Not angry, not surprised, just tired. Back in the present, my Aunt Denise suddenly touched my arm. "You need to be careful," she whispered. I frowned. "About what?" "Raymond's been meeting investors privately for days." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean, days?" "He told people leadership needed immediate continuity if..." She hesitated. "If your father didn't recover." I looked across the room at my uncle laughing with 2 executives near the bar. My father had been dead for less than 8 hours, and Raymond had already positioned himself as the replacement. I walked straight toward Martin Hale, one of the senior executives who'd worked with my father for nearly 20 years. "Did you know Raymond was planning this?" Martin loosened his tie nervously. Merveille, tell me the truth. He glanced toward Raymond before lowering his voice. Your uncle ordered accounting to hand over internal financial controls before the hospital even released your father's records. I stared at him. Why would anyone allow that? Martin swallowed hard. Because near the end, your father looked terrified of him. The sentence hit me like cold water. My father wasn't afraid of competitors. He wasn't afraid of lawsuits, and he definitely wasn't afraid of Raymond. At least, he never used to be. Before I could ask another question, Daniel Mercer approached quietly beside me. He unlocked the black document case halfway, then stopped. Your father contacted me 6 months ago, he said carefully. He believed this exact situation might happen after his death. I looked at him, stunned. What exactly did he leave behind? What he left behind, Raymond said loudly as he strode toward us, is private family business that does not belong in front of employees. Every conversation in the hall stopped again. Daniel calmly closed the document case. Raymond pointed directly at me. My niece is emotional, understandably emotional, but grief does not change legal reality. That's funny, coming from someone trying to steal a company during a funeral, I shot back. A wave of whispers spread across the room. Raymond's jaw tightened. Then he snapped his fingers toward one of the assistants near the front tables. Bring the transfer documents. A thick folder was placed in his hands moments later. He turned dramatically toward the investors and executives. My brother signed ownership authority over to me 3 months ago, he announced, to ensure stable leadership. He began placing copies across the tables. I grabbed one immediately. At first glance, it looked official. Company seals, legal formatting, my father's signature. But something felt wrong. I stared harder at the final page. The signature looked stiff, almost traced. You forged this, I said. Raymond laughed openly this time. Please stop humiliating yourself. Several relatives immediately sided with him. Merveille, enough. This is not the day for accusations.
Your uncle helped build that company, too. Then one investor actually stood and shook Raymond's hand.
Congratulations, he said.
My stomach turned. Daniel still hadn't spoken. That silence was killing me. Raymond noticed it too. He pointed toward the doors.
Security. 2 guards stepped into the room. This meeting will continue professionally, Raymond announced. Escort Miss Smith outside until she regains composure.
The humiliation hit harder than the shove earlier. These were employees who'd watched me work 16-hour days beside my father for years. People I'd trained. People I'd defended during layoffs. And now they were watching security remove me from my own father's funeral reception. One guard approached carefully.
Miss Smith.
Something inside me finally broke. No, I said sharply. The entire room froze. I stepped forward and pointed directly at Raymond. You stole from my father. Gasps erupted around the hall. Raymond exploded instantly.
You are completely out of control.
You emptied company accounts.
You have no idea what you're talking about.
Then why were records deleted? I shouted back. That landed. Several executives looked at each other immediately. Raymond recovered fast. Too fast.
She's grieving, he said to the room. This is trauma talking.
Then a shaky voice spoke from the back corner.
No,
the older accountant said quietly.
It isn't.
Every head turned. The accountant slowly stood from his chair. Raymond's face darkened instantly.
Sit down, Howard.
Howard ignored him.
"You ordered accounting staff to erase transaction histories 4 months ago,"
he said.
"You said Mr. Smith approved it."
The room erupted. Investors started firing questions. Executives began arguing across tables. One relative loudly asked what transactions Howard meant. Raymond pointed furiously at the accountant.
"You are violating confidentiality agreements."
Howard didn't back down. Daniel Mercer finally placed the black case on the center table and flipped the locks open. The sound alone silenced half the room. My uncle saw the documents inside and lunged forward. Slam! His hand crushed the case shut before anyone could see inside.
"Nobody reads anything,"
Raymond barked, breathing heavily.
"Until my attorneys arrive."
The reception hall dissolved into chaos. Investors crowded around tables demanding answers. Executives argued in tense clusters near the walls. Security guards stopped trying to remove me and instead watched Raymond like they didn't know whose orders mattered anymore. My uncle stood beside the sealed black case with both hands pressed against it. Like if he let go, everything would collapse. And for the first time that night, I think he realized it already was. 2 attorneys rushed into the hall and immediately pulled Raymond aside near the windows overlooking the parking lot. Their voices stayed low, but I could see the panic in their body language. Daniel Mercer stepped quietly beside me. "He's delaying," I whispered.
"Yes,"
Daniel replied.
"Because time is the only thing he still controls."
I folded my arms tightly. "Tell me what my father found." Daniel studied the room before answering carefully.
6 months ago, your father discovered unauthorized offshore transfers connected to company reserve accounts.
My chest tightened. "How much?"
"Millions."
The noise in the hall suddenly felt distant.
"At first, he believed outside executives were siphoning funds,"
Daniel continued.
"Then the trail led back to Raymond."
Everything clicked at once. The locked office doors, the late-night arguments, the fear Martin mentioned. My father hadn't been protecting the company from competitors. He'd been protecting it from his own brother. Before I could speak again, Howard, the older accountant, approached nervously, holding a silver flash drive.
"I kept backups,"
he said quietly.
"In case this ever happened."
He slipped it into my hand.
Raymond thought the records were deleted.
Minutes later, Daniel opened one of the conference room laptops beside the hall. File after file appeared on the screen. Shell companies, wire transfers, hidden authorizations. Millions routed through accounts connected directly to Raymond. I felt sick.
Not because of the money, because my father had been fighting this while dying. Behind us, several investors began demanding immediate audits. One executive shouted, "If ownership isn't verified tonight, operations freeze tomorrow morning." That changed everything. Fear spread fast across the room. Not grief anymore, business panic. And Raymond saw it happening in real time. He suddenly marched back toward the center of the hall with his attorneys behind him. "As acting financial authority," he announced loudly, "I am assuming emergency leadership control effective immediately." Daniel closed the laptop slowly. Then the elevator doors opened behind us. 2 uniformed police officers stepped into the reception hall. Silence crashed over the room. Howard lowered his eyes. "I reported the financial discrepancies this morning," he admitted quietly. Raymond stared at him in disbelief. "You idiot," he whispered. One officer approached calmly. We're here regarding allegations of corporate fraud and financial misconduct. Every bit of confidence drained from Raymond's face. He turned instantly toward Daniel and pointed at the black case. "Read the will," he demanded. "Now." His desperation shocked me. He still believed he could win this publicly. Daniel looked at him for a long moment before reopening the case slowly. This time, nobody stopped him. From inside, he removed a sealed envelope. Across the front, written in my father's handwriting, were 4 words. "To my daughter, Merveille." My throat tightened immediately. Raymond saw the writing too. And suddenly, he didn't look angry anymore. He looked afraid. Daniel carefully broke the seal, then paused. "There's one more instruction your father left," he said quietly. The room held its breath. Daniel looked toward the projector mounted near the stage. "Before the will is read, Richard Smith wanted everyone in this room to hear something first." Daniel inserted a small memory card into the projector beside the stage. Nobody in the reception hall moved. Even the police officers stayed silent near the entrance. The screen flickered once. Then my father appeared, recorded from his office, wearing the same gray sweater he used to keep behind his desk during late nights at work. For a second, the room forgot how to breathe. My father looked directly into the camera. "If you're watching this," he began calmly, "then Raymond has already tried to take control of the company." A shockwave moved through the hall. I looked toward my uncle. His face had gone completely pale. My father continued. "A year ago, I discovered missing funds inside Smith Logistics. At first, I believed outside executives were responsible." He paused. "I was wrong." The room stayed dead silent except for the rain against the windows. "The theft traced back to my own brother." Several relatives slowly turned toward Raymond. One investor muttered, "Jesus Christ." My father explained everything carefully. The hidden accounts, the offshore transfers, the deleted records, the private confrontations. "I confronted Raymond multiple times," he said. "Each time, he promised he would fix it before anyone discovered the damage." Raymond lowered his head, but my father wasn't finished. "I chose not to expose him publicly immediately because sudden collapse would have destroyed employee pensions, frozen operations, and ruined families who depended on this company." That hit the employees hardest. Some of them looked physically sick. Then my father leaned closer toward the camera. "But there is something else everyone deserves to know." My chest tightened. For years, the person truly managing this company beside me was my daughter, Merveille. The room turned toward me instantly. She handled operations most executives believed came from me. She solved crises before investors ever heard about them. She earned the trust of employees without demanding recognition. Tears bedding my eyes immediately. I intentionally kept her away in corporate politics because I knew Raymond would target her if he realized I was preparing her to take over. Raymond with his eyes. My father's voice hardened for the first time in the recording. "If Raymond is attempting to claim ownership after my death, then he has ignored every opportunity I gave him to tell the truth." The screen went black. Nobody spoke. Not one person. Daniel Mercer finally stood and opened the will documents fully.
Richard Smith transferred controlling ownership of Smith Logistics to his daughter, Merveille Smith, 4 months ago through an irrevocable legal structure witnessed and filed with corporate authorities.
A stunned silence swept the hall again. Then Daniel lifted the papers Raymond had distributed earlier.
These ownership transfer documents presented by Raymond Smith are fraudulent copies.
One of Raymond's own attorneys stepped backward immediately. Another quietly removed his glasses and looked away. My Aunt Denise covered her mouth. Investors who had congratulated Raymond earlier suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. Raymond finally snapped. "That recording proves nothing," he shouted. "It could have been edited." Howard interrupted him. "No," he said firmly. The older accountant walked forward, carrying printed transaction records. "I signed the original internal audits myself." He handed copies directly to the police officers. One officer immediately took Raymond's folder from the table. Another began collecting the forged documents. The room watched it happen in complete silence. Raymond looked around desperately, searching for support. Nobody moved. Nobody defended him. Not anymore. Then the officers stepped toward him. "You think this company won't destroy you too?" Raymond said suddenly, staring directly at me. I looked at the man who'd humiliated me at my father's funeral. The man my father had spent his final months trying to stop. And calmly answered, "It already destroyed the wrong person." The officers escorted him across the reception hall, while employees silently stepped aside to let him pass. No one stopped him. No one spoke to him. By the time the elevator doors closed behind him, the entire balance of the room had changed. Several longtime employees approached me quietly afterward. One warehouse supervisor shook his head and said, "Your father trusted you more than anyone. We all knew it." An investor who had congratulated Raymond earlier apologized to me face to face. Others followed. Not because they suddenly became loyal, because power had shifted. And everyone knew it. 3 weeks later, I officially became CEO of Smith Logistics. The investigation recovered a large portion of the stolen money through frozen accounts and seized assets. Employee pension funds were restored first. Executives connected to Raymond were removed quietly over the next month. We launched internal transparency reforms my father had already planned before he died. But the hardest moment came later. One evening, after everyone had gone home, I finally walked alone into my father's office. For weeks, I'd avoided it. Everything was still there. His coffee mug, his reading glasses, stacks of handwritten notes covering the desk. Then I noticed one envelope sitting in the center blotter. My name was written across the front. Inside was a single sentence in my father's handwriting. "You were always ready." I sat in his chair holding that note for a long time, while the building stayed completely silent around me. At my father's funeral, my uncle thought he buried me with him. He never realized my father had already handed me the company.